So I was actually really, I was really surprised, and I was pleasantly surprised to learn that our friend Louis Lang, I know that I've talked about him on the show before. This is a gentleman in South Carolina who has been facing some pretty serious health problems, including a loss of his vision or diminishing vision. And he was initially very skeptical about the Affordable Care Act and had some trouble with it. And then encountered some of these health problems and realized that because of the way that policies are playing out in or not playing out in South Carolina, he was without health care coverage. And so he started a GoFundMe campaign, and his story has gone viral over the internet. And I know I've talked about him on the show before, and I reached out to him to let him know that I did support him, that I felt that his cause is illustrative of why we need health justice in America. And I sent him, the link to our show. I sent him, an article that I had written for the Huffington Post. And I invited him. I said, if you want to talk about this on the show, you're more than welcome to join us. And I was totally surprised when he, called back and said, "Yeah, let's chat it up." So I'm very excited to, interview him on the show today, and and have him, describe his own experience to you guys, because I think it is very illustrative of what everyday Americans are encountering when it comes to the complexity of just getting well in America. So I'm really excited to have him on the program, and we're going to talk to him in just a little bit. And yeah, we're going to cover, after we're done talking with him, we'll cover Mental Health Awareness Month, and then a couple of other news items that have been happening this week in the world of health and medicine and public health. So, Mr. Lang, how are you doing?
Good, good. How are you today?
I'm good. Lewis, thank you so much for joining us on the show. I'm really excited to have you and have you share your experience. I know that the media coverage of your story has generated a lot of talk, but some of it is not always accurate. So I'm actually really glad that you're here to just sort of tell us your experience from your own perspective. Why don't you bring us up to speed about how your health is doing? How are you holding up, sir?
Um, well, my legs are holding me up. No. um, well, as far as my eyes are concerned, the first doctor that I did go see, he was, pardon the expression, a quack. He was just after publicity and not actually to take care of my eyes. I do have my next appointment is scheduled for June 9th with another ophthalmologist that comes highly recommended. Um, and the other thing is unfortunately I'm starting to show early signs of kidney disease.
Oh, sorry to hear
Yeah.
that.
And I have an appointment with a general practitioner scheduled for June the 11th.
Okay, so it sounds like, I mean, you're that some of your health conditions are getting worse, but it sounds like you're also going to be able to get a little bit of help too. How are things looking for your GoFundMe fundraiser? Are you going to be able to, afford everything?
Um, I will probably, obviously after I see the doctors, honest doctors, I'll be able to judge that better. But it will have to go up because just for what the doctors have been telling me about my eyes, even the quack, that it is going to be a slow, long process. Um, Several different surgeries, not what originally was thought up, and then on top of that, now the kidneys. But that decision we made. Obviously, um, after I see the doctors and I have a better understanding of things. So, but yep, unfortunately, that will end up having to go up.
Yeah, and the thing that I find um so, striking about your story, and that I think that really I find heartbreaking because it's a story that's happening in America, is that, at the same time that you're, dealing with the burdens of these health problems, those health problems are causing you financial problems, which I feel that it's really unjust for, a country as rich as America to put you in a position like that. Do you think things would have been different if you lived in another state that maybe expanded Medicaid or worked with the Affordable Care Act a little bit more cooperatively?
Oh, 100%.
In what way? Like what do you feel would be different?
Well, um, if we had lived in a state that had expanded the Medicaid,
Mhm.
um, then obviously I would have health insurance. Because see, I did try to sign up for the ACA last year, but it was just too complicated, especially as far as with the type of work I do. My income varies week to week, month to month.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so if we were living in a state where um, things were a lot more simplified, or they had expanded Medicaid, um, I wouldn't have to. I would have no need for a GoFundMe account or anything like that, and I would have probably already been back to work or well on my way back to work.
Oh wow. So I mean, this is actually affecting your, your work career.
Oh yes, I do handyman work, and also I work um, fixing and maintaining foreclosure properties for the bank and for HUD.
Okay. Okay. So, it sounds like, if you had, that your circumstances are unfortunately being decided by, the state that you live in, even though you live in the United States. And, so if you could tell South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley or the South Carolina legislature anything, what would it be? And just to remind you, we're on the radio and, my mom listens to this show. So, you know,
Yes,
um,
we did talk about that earlier.
right.
I won't say that.
Yeah, but no, but I mean, like, I'm not asking you to be nice, but if you don't mind just sort of respecting the radio part of it, that'd be
Yes.
great.
Um, well, let's put it this way. She needs to stick her head out of the place where the sun doesn't shine. Was that clean enough for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Okay. Now, secondly, politics has no place in healthcare, because as soon as they stick politics into healthcare, half this country is eliminated. Whether you're rich, you're poor, whether you're a liberal or a conservative, it doesn't matter. Half the country is eliminated. So, if she was if she was standing right in front of me right now, I would tell her, "Excuse me, you are supposed to serve your constituents, not your own personal political opinions."
Mm.
And I actually say that to all the red states that did not expand the Medicaid,
Hmm.
and that statement actually goes for every politician in the country.
Yeah, because I think that what you're touching on is that healthcare is just, such a fundamental right that to obstruct it with politics is, it really does, millions of us such a disservice.
Yeah, I had no idea. I knew there was about 5 million, but after watching, I think it was one of your last shows, or excuse me, listening to it, it's like you said it's like the 8 million.
Yeah, so the numbers, I'm glad that you brought up that point because I probably should clarify that the coverage gap is about 4 million people. And then there's another several million that are depending on the federal subsidies. Like those are
Oh,
the,
okay.
and so when they go to the health insurance exchange and they want to buy health insurance under the Affordable Care Act, in order to keep that insurance plan affordable, a lot of Americans are, getting the help from a federal subsidy. And I mean, there are millions of those folks. So, like there are millions of folks who are kind of, stuck in this limbo. And they're very much in situations like yours. Their incomes, fluctuate and they go back and forth, and they're just trying to, make ends meet and get by.
Yeah.
And I think that I feel you're absolutely right that when governors and state legislatures and members of Congress turn this into a political game, there are serious health consequences.
Oh yeah. I mean, the way I see it right now, the U.S. government has become an insurance agent.
And so, but let me ask you this. We seem to trust the U.S. government to be, a provider of healthcare when it comes to Medicare. Would we be better off if like all of us just had Medicare and it was just simplified?
From the get-go, I've always been in favor of the ACA.
Mm-hmm.
My problem is it didn't go far enough. Medicaid, Medicare, ACA should all be combined into one unit. And I guess that's called. You told me the other day.
Well, some people call it
single payer.
Yeah. Some people, envision that as single payer. There's a lot of different kinds of single payer out there. But the thing that I really gather from having talked to you, now and before is that, the person who is struggling with their health shouldn't be put in a position where they're having to become a policy expert, a finance expert.
Of course not.
Yeah.
And, and as we've talked before, you've gone to my GoFundMe page and you've been, reading some of the comments and everything else. And one of the comments that really has been standing out over and over again is that people have been asking me to be, quote, the poster boy. It's kind of funny since I'm 49. For the ACA, so that other people can benefit from what we've gone through. And first, I've embraced that wholeheartedly. And in fact, I've asked people to call their TV stations and stuff and demand that they put me on because I'd like to be the poster boy for the ACA. But, me and my wife, we were talking about this over the weekend, and we figured out the ultimate way of paying this forward is that we are creating the Louis Lang Foundation.
All right. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, the Louis Lang Foundation is going to be made so that other people that fall into the gap, like I did, have somewhere they can reach out for help. Because, quite frankly, not everybody is a loudmouth Hispanic Jew like me. So this way they have an organization they can reach out to for help. And what we will do is that we will find them a doctor, and the payments will be made straight to the doctor or hospital. So, they don't have to go through what I went through. And like I said, it's going to be called the Louis Lang Foundation, Liberals Helping Americans.
Wow.
Yeah. Talk about paying it forward.
Yeah. Well, sir, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the show today. I think that, your story is, I think it's illustrative. I think it's inspiring. I feel that, you're doing, an incredible service to the country for actually like kind of trying to get the record straight about the Affordable Care Act. And, in the midst of your health problems, to actually do your best to pay it forward, I think is very admirable. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. So that was Mr. Louis Lang from Fort Mill, South Carolina. Want to thank him for joining us here on Dr. America on the WEAC Radio Network. And so for a lot of folks who have just heard, from Louis Lang directly, you know, what I've appreciated about talking to him on the program and before last night, I had a chance to talk to him a little bit, get to know him before, I brought him on the air. The thing that I've appreciated is that while I might not agree 100% with everything that he believes in politically, what I do respect about Louis Lang is that one, I'm struck by his willingness to learn. Even last night when we were talking about the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid, there were some things, some concerns, some criticism, some skepticism that he brought up. And I was able to kind of point out to him that, oh, actually, the ACA does this or the ACA does that. And then other times when I was able to tell him that, you're right, this is where the ACA did not go far enough. We don't have a single payer system. And it was interesting to actually bring up the point about single payer because, he was not familiar with the terminology, but when I described it to him, saying that, well, you could have Medicare for all, or you could have something like, the Swiss have in Switzerland, where insurance is kind of treated like a utility. It was interesting how he had these moments of like, oh, and what I find so striking about those moments is that it shows to me that that there's a willingness to to actually listen and not just wait for your turn to speak again. That there is some openness there to exchange ideas. And even in the midst of, whatever the imperfections are of his politics, the fact that he's willing to learn and that he's willing to engage and converse, I think is actually one of the things that I've come to, respect about him. And I feel like as progressives and liberals and as activists, we can't really be putting these litmus tests of purity of politics at the very beginning. I think that we have to have, a pretty open tent to, welcome people to have conversations. I think we have to venture outside of that tent and find that, that common ground is in places that we weren't really expecting. So, his willingness to learn and my willingness to learn with him, I think has been kind of an interesting experience. The other thing that really strikes me is just his willingness to help. I think that, even as I just now told him, the fact that in the midst of so many health problems and such a, burden, I think that, in the midst of all that health situation, which for any one of us, I think would be more than enough to just, fill up our day and, make us, exhausted, maybe even like, depressed. I think that, despite all of that, the fact that he wants to help people not face the circumstances that he has been in, I think is really remarkable. I think that's so admirable. And so that willingness to learn and that willingness to help, I actually kind of hope that, if you're a politician watching this, if you're, if you're listening to this and you have any kind of political power whatsoever, I really feel that, that willingness to learn and that willingness to help are just huge. And it would make such a difference if people like Governor Nikki Haley, the South Carolina legislature, would actually follow the example of like one of their own constituents and do right by the people of South Carolina, expand Medicaid, cooperate with, the Affordable Care Act, establish better terms with the federal government to create a healthcare system that actually does right by the hundreds of thousands of people in South Carolina who who really don't need the hassle of becoming a policy expert or a finance expert when they're in need of healthcare. So again, I want to thank Louis Lang for coming on the program. I felt that it was a really good interview. I'm glad that we were able to give him a chance to express his own voice, and I want to thank you guys for coming along for that part of the ride. When we come back, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about Mental Health Awareness Month, and the reason why I'm wearing this green shirt will probably be a little bit more obvious when we are done talking about that. We'll be back in a few. You've been listening to the Dr. America Show here on the WEAC Radio Network. I am your host, Dr. Sanjeev Sriram, and we'll be right back.